When you look at the engineering behind modern fighter jets, there's this really specific, almost paradoxical problem that designers run into.
Oh, right, the human element.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, we can build an engine that pushes a jet to Mach 5. We can forge an airframe out of titanium that handles unimaginable atmospheric stress. I mean, the machine itself can handle the acceleration perfectly fine.
Right.
But the limitation, the single point of failure where the whole system breaks down, is the human pilot sitting in the cockpit. Because if you accelerate too fast, the sheer G-force literally drains the blood right out of the pilot's brain.
Yeah, they lose their vision, they pass out, and the system fails.
Right. And not because the machine broke, but because the machine completely outpaced the biology of the person trying to steer it.
The technological capacity basically crashes head first into the physical limits of the human operating it.
Which is such a wild concept. And looking through the stack of sources we've gathered for you today, that G-force metaphor feels like, well, the perfect lens for everything happening in the world right now. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are looking at the June 1st, 2026 edition of the Daily Tech Reader. And our mission for you today is to explore that exact friction, the friction of transformation.
I like that title.
Yeah, we're taking a snapshot of a world moving at just absolute breakneck speed. Massive technological leaps are suddenly colliding with legal boundaries, geopolitical stress, and like we said, the literal physical limits of the human body.
Which is exactly why we have to view these news items not as, just isolated daily events. They form this deeply connected web. They show us how society adapts or actively resists adapting to extreme evolutionary pressure.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the most massive structural shift generating that pressure, which is artificial intelligence. Because we're seeing an incredible duality in the market right now.
Oh, absolutely.
OpenAI just crossed $25 billion in annualized revenue. Anthropic is right on their heels. They're approaching $19 billion. Both companies are hurtling toward IPOs.
Yeah, Anthropic already filed their preliminary paperwork.
Right. And OpenAI is eyeing late 2026. So we are potentially looking at the largest tech listings in U.S. history. But help me square this circle. The market is valuing them astronomically, but it's not because of the consumer chatbots we all played with a few years ago, is it?
No, not at all. The underlying mechanism of the industry has fundamentally shifted. What's fascinating here is that if you looked at NVIDIA's GTC 2026 conference in San Jose recently, the entire conversation completely moved away from that old demo culture of generative text.
Right.
The dominant theme is now agentic AI.
Wait, break that down for us. What makes an AI agentic compared to what we're used to?
It really comes down to autonomy and execution. So a standard generative AI model is passive, right? You ask it to write a draft of an email and it gives you text. Then you have to copy, paste, and send it yourself.
Yeah, which still takes human effort.
Exactly. But agentic AI acts as an active agent on your behalf. You give it a high-level goal and it breaks that goal down into steps, logs into your enterprise software, maybe pulls data from Salesforce. Yeah, it cross-references that with your inventory, drafts the email, and physically hits send on its own. It's executing repeatable workflows across sales, customer support, research.
So it's actually doing the job, not just helping you do it.
Right. The companies winning this race are deploying task-specific systems that are rapidly becoming the invisible backbone of corporate America. That utility is what drives a $100 billion valuation. It's essential infrastructure now.
But here is where the G-force hits the pilot, right? Because right as they're building this indispensable infrastructure, the legal reality is catching up in a really brutal way.
Yeah, the Florida lawsuit.
Yes. Florida's Attorney General just filed a first-in-the-nation civil lawsuit against OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman. And it's not isolated. There are over 20 active lawsuits across the country right now. But this Florida suit takes a completely different angle.
It really does. It's a huge shift.
It alleges OpenAI suppressed internal safety warnings, marketed ChatGPT as safe despite knowing the risks, and specifically exposed minors to behavioral addiction and self-harm content without any parental oversight.
Yeah.
And they are citing horrific, tangible tragedies here. The FSU campus shooting, the Tumbler Ridge mass shooting up in Canada, and multiple documented suicides. So I'm looking at this and wondering, if the legal liability of cognitive harm to minors is this unprecedented, how are institutional investors still valuing these IPOs in the hundreds of billions?
Well, the tension you're highlighting centers entirely on those new legal phrases, behavioral addiction and cognitive harm. Because previously, AI litigation was almost exclusively about copyright infringement.
Right. Authors suing over their books being used as training data.
Exactly. Or platforms suing over data scraping. And that is a measurable financial dispute. but arguing that the product itself fundamentally alters human cognition and that the creators allegedly suppressed evidence of that harm, that is a massive paradigm shift in the courts.
It sounds incredibly similar to the early litigation against the pharmaceutical or tobacco industries. Like, you have this miracle product generating billions, but suddenly the societal side effects are hitting the general population.
The parallel is very strong, and it creates a dual reality for the AI industry right now. On the enterprise side, those agentic workflows we just discussed are massive cost savers.
Huge efficiency drivers.
Right. But on the consumer side, especially regarding vulnerable populations like minors, the technology is rapidly becoming a sprawling liability. So investors are making a calculated bet. They're wagering that the enterprise revenue will ultimately dwarf whatever consumer litigation costs arise.
But if the Florida AG establishes a legal precedent for cognitive harm, I mean, that could force a fundamental redesign of how these models are deployed to the public.
Absolutely. It changes the whole playbook.
Which naturally leads us to how this technology is reshaping the actual human workforce. Because the dominant narrative for the last few years has been, AI is coming for your entry-level job.
Right, the algorithms replacing the junior analysts.
Exactly. But a new study from the New York Federal Reserve completely flips that script. They found that it's actually remote work, not AI automation, that is aggressively sidelining young college grads from entry-level roles.
Yeah, this study was fascinating. Companies are simply less likely to hire recent grads into positions that can be done entirely from a laptop in a bedroom.
But why? I mean, what's the mechanism behind that?
Well, it reveals a lot about how human capital actually develops. When you think about an entry-level worker, their value isn't just in their immediate output, it's in their potential to learn the company culture, absorb institutional knowledge, and grow.
Right, the apprenticeship phase.
Exactly. And in a physical office, that happens organically through osmosis. A junior employee overhears a senior colleague diffusing a tense client call, or they get a 5-minute debrief while walking back from a meeting.
Right, and that informal, undocumented knowledge transfer just vanishes in a fully remote environment.
Exactly. Everything becomes a scheduled video call or a text-based Slack message.
So the friction to train someone becomes too high. It's easier to just hire someone who already knows what they're doing, or, ironically, outsource the task to an agentic AI workflow rather than schedule a Zoom call to teach a 22-year-old how to do it.
Right. The architecture of the apprenticeship phase of white-collar work is just being systematically dismantled.
And while that isolation is happening, the historical protections for those workers are shifting beneath their feet, too. The EEOC is currently moving to roll back decades-old employment discrimination rules under Title VII.
Which have been the bedrock of workplace protection since the 1960s.
Exactly. And on top of that, we see companies like Garner Health just raising $100 million at a $2.74 billion valuation, which their entire business model uses data analytics to match workers with high-quality physicians.
Right, essentially turning human resources and healthcare into a fully algorithmic process.
Yes. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a 22-year-old entering the workforce today for a second. You are isolated in your apartment because of remote work, the legal workplace protections your parents relied on are changing, and your healthcare is being optimized by a data algorithm. Are we just losing the human mentorship phase entirely because we prioritize the convenience of remote work?
It really does create a profoundly sterile introduction to adult life. To compensate for the lack of human intuition and physical connection in the workplace, society is substituting data-driven platforms.
Right.
Like Garner Health is a highly efficient system on paper. Using data to find the best doctor makes logical sense. But for the individual worker who is just trying to find their footing in their career, the combination of remote isolation, shifting legal protections, and algorithmic management, it just feels incredibly unmooring.
And that sense of unmooring, that opacity in how systems govern our lives, is spilling out into the broader culture. We're seeing a fierce public pushback against closed doors. Just look at the legal system in Utah right now.
The Tyler Robinson hearing.
Yes. A judge just ruled that the July preliminary hearing for Tyler Robinson, who is the individual accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk, will be completely open to the media and the public. The defense's request to restrict access was explicitly denied. And, looking strictly at the legal facts here, regardless of the intensely polarized politics involved, this ruling is a fascinating reflection of the current national mood.
It really is, because the common denominator is a demand for transparency in an unstable climate. Whether it's a judge opening a highly sensitive courtroom in Utah or the Florida Attorney General demanding to see OpenAI's internal safety warnings, the public is aggressively demanding to see the mechanics of how decisions are made.
Because when the systems around you feel opaque, trust evaporates.
Exactly. Transparency becomes a non-negotiable demand.
And nowhere is that instability and lack of trust more apparent right now than on the global stage. Because the unintended consequences of borderless technology don't just stop at the remote office or the courtroom. They are actively reshaping the mechanics of global conflict.
Yeah, the cyber warfare elements.
Right. The Financial Times is reporting that Iranian actors are using Western AI models, specifically ChatGPT and Gemini, to develop malware and launch highly sophisticated phishing campaigns. At the exact same time, the fragile U.S.-Iran ceasefire, which was brokered by Pakistan back in April, is falling apart.
Right. Both sides are trading accusations, and Iran is publicly threatening to open other fronts.
And here's where it gets really interesting. And just to pause and be completely clear with you, the listener. Right now, we are not taking sides or endorsing the viewpoints of any political figures here, whether that's Trump, the Iranian leadership, or the Israeli leadership. We are strictly and impartially reporting the diplomatic maneuvers and their economic ripple effects.
Absolutely. We're just looking at the mechanics of the situation.
Exactly. So with that context, President Trump recently posted on Truth Social that indirect talks are proceeding at a rapid pace to stop the shooting between Israel and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, the top story in the Daily Tech Reader notes a tentative agreement regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, looking solely at the geopolitical logistics, the intersection of digital innovation and physical conflict is accelerating dramatically.
Yeah, because the concept of dual-use technology completely changes the reality of global security. Think about it. Historically, if a nation wanted to export a weapon, they faced massive border checks, international treaties, complex physical logistics. You had to move missile parts across oceans.
Right, very visible physical friction.
But with Frontier AI, a team of engineers in Silicon Valley builds a language model to help people write code. And suddenly, because the internet lacks physical borders, that exact same model functions as an advanced cyber weapon in Tehran. It's like exporting a weapon with zero border friction.
And that digital friction immediately creates physical world friction. The cyber operations accelerated by Western AI are part of a much broader asymmetrical warfare strategy. And when tensions escalate in those regions, it immediately impacts critical physical choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is right at home.
Exactly. The reason the Strait of Hormuz matters directly to your wallet is because roughly a fifth of the world's daily oil consumption passes through that narrow waterway. Any threat to that shipping lane keeps global oil markets unsettled.
And unsettled oil markets keep fuel prices elevated.
Which directly sustains the inflation pressure you feel when buying groceries.
So the digital malware leads to physical gridlock, which leads to higher prices at the supermarket, all connected. But there is a surprisingly resilient counter-indicator in the financial data here. Despite all of this, the geopolitical chaos, the AI liabilities, the energy costs, FedEx just issued upward financial guidance.
Yeah, that is a crucial data point. Typically, geopolitical instability spikes oil, which spikes freight costs, which depresses shipping volume.
Right.
So if FedEx is revising their financial guidance upward, their internal data indicates that global logistics and shipping demand are holding remarkably steady. Consumers and businesses are continuing to buy and move goods. The economy is stubbornly absorbing the inflation and pushing forward despite the macro uncertainty.
And that stubborn human push brings us to the next massive area of friction. Because we aren't just pushing our economic models or our geopolitical boundaries to the limit, we are pushing the literal physical limits of the Earth and the human body.
Oh, the Everest numbers.
Yes. Get this, a record 274 climbers were simultaneously in Mount Everest's death zone during a single period this season. That's the area above 26,000 feet.
It's unbelievable.
And at the exact same time, back at sea level, the environment is dealing with its own extremes. Day 2 of the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season is surprisingly quiet, but only because El Niño suppression is holding it back. Meanwhile, the heat is absolutely baking the South. Dallas and Houston are already hitting the mid-90s in early June.
Right.
And the Western Drought Monitor shows that while the Pacific Northwest is getting a bit of relief, exceptional long-term drought is persisting in the Central Plains. It's so bad it's driving figures like Aaron Brockovich to launch highly anticipated new environmental campaigns to mobilize legal action.
This raises an important question, though. Because the physiological reality of the death zone on Everest provides a profound behavioral parallel for everything we're discussing today.
How so?
Well, at 26,000 feet, the barometric pressure is so low that your lungs cannot absorb sufficient oxygen from the air. You are essentially suffocating with every breath. Your blood thickens, your digestive system shuts down to conserve energy, and your brain begins to swell.
Oh, wow.
It is an environment fundamentally hostile to human biology. You are actively dying the entire time you are up there.
Wait, so why are 274 people risking their lives at the exact same time to stand in a literal traffic jam where their cells are dying? I mean, is this traffic jam at the top of the world the ultimate symptom of our modern obsession with conquering the unconquerable?
It really speaks to a very specific kind of human hubris. Look at the environmental stress points we just outlined. We have persistent droughts devastating the agricultural plains, extreme heat waves becoming the baseline in the south. And we are relying on a weather anomaly like El Niño, which creates high-altitude wind shear that chops the tops off developing hurricanes just to buy us a quiet storm season. Nature is providing massive, flashing red warning lights.
And we just ignore them.
Exactly. Much like those 274 climbers staring at a bottleneck in the death zone, humanity stubbornly pushes forward into the danger. We operate under the assumption that ambition, commerce, and engineering can ultimately overcome biological and environmental limits.
But dealing with all of this, I mean, the billion-dollar AI lawsuits, the algorithms managing our careers, the cyber warfare, the environmental red flags, it builds an incredible amount of psychological pressure.
Absolutely.
So how does society let off steam? Where's the release valve for all of this friction?
Well, we turn to culture, entertainment, and sports. And what the sources show us this month is a total renaissance of raw human grit.
It's a collective craving for the unscripted.
Yes. Listen to this cultural lineup. Serena Williams is returning to professional tennis this month at the HSBC Championships in London.
At age 44. At 44 years old, stepping back onto the court. The FIFA World Cup 2026 venues are finally locked in, with Lumen Field transforming into Seattle Stadium for the global tournament. In the NBA Finals, Game 1 tips off Wednesday, and the Knicks are Vegas favorites over the Spurs, despite San Antonio holding home court advantage.
Right.
In baseball, you have the genuine heartbreak of the Reds' Elly De La Cruz landing on the injured list with a hamstring strain. In the NHL, the Carolina Hurricanes are one win away from the Stanley Cup Final because goaltender Frederik Andersen just delivered an absolute MVP-caliber shutout.
Incredible performance.
And even at the box office, the dynamic is shifting. Legacy corporate studios are being outperformed by YouTubers, creators making raw, unfiltered content, while the major June theatrical releases are headlined by Disney, Pixar, and A24, studios specifically known for highly distinct, emotionally driven human storytelling.
The contrast between the macro news and our cultural obsessions is striking. The hunger for genuine, unscripted human achievement is skyrocketing, precisely because of the artificiality and noise everywhere else.
Think about the irony here. In a month where the business world is obsessed with agentic AI workflows, autonomously sending emails, and global militaries are navigating algorithmic cyber warfare, our attention is captivated by the exact opposite.
Right.
Like an AI model can calculate the mathematically perfect angle and velocity of a tennis serve, but it cannot replicate a 44-year-old Serena Williams stepping onto a grass court to prove that human greatness, endurance, and willpower simply cannot be coded.
Because when your doctor is selected by an algorithm, when your entry-level job is replaced by a remote workflow, and when geopolitical threats are generated by large language models, you fundamentally crave reality.
Yeah.
A hamstring strain for an athlete like Elly De La Cruz is devastating, but it is undeniably biologically real. A shutout by Frederik Andersen in the NHL playoffs is a triumph of human reflexes facing down physical exhaustion. The shift at the box office toward YouTubers and independent studios reflects a massive public desire for parasocial authenticity over manicured, committee-driven corporate productions. Society is actively fighting to reclaim the human narrative.
It's the friction of transformation. The machine is accelerating, the G-force is building, but humanity is keeping a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today.
You really have.
We started with the massive financial paradox of AI generating historic wealth while simultaneously facing unprecedented legal liability for cognitive harm. We look at the profound isolation of the remote worker and the dismantling of workplace apprenticeship. We navigated the geopolitical chessboard, seeing how borderless technology is weaponized and how that impacts critical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz in your wallet. We stared at the 274 climbers stubbornly defying biology in Everest's death zone. And finally, we saw how society seeks refuge in the raw, authentic triumphs of human athletes and creators.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spend so much time talking about how AI models are trained on human data to learn how to mimic us, how to write like us, and how to work like us. But if an artificial intelligence model is truly trained on all the data we've discussed today, what does it actually conclude about us as a species?
Oh, that's a good question.
It analyzes a creature that builds $25 billion virtual empires, fights over strategic straits of water, relies on algorithms to find a doctor, yet still feels the burning, completely irrational need to risk death climbing 26,000 feet of rock and ice just to say they stood at the top. Maybe the most perplexing data point to an advanced AI isn't our technology or our conflicts, but our undeniable, beautiful, and entirely irrational drive.
The G-force might make us dizzy, but we still built the jet and we still volunteered to fly it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the underlying mechanisms, and we will catch you next time.